Hello, everyone. Welcome to Our Greatest Strength, yet another wonderful interview. I'm Dimple Shah.
And I'm Glenn Keller. And today's guest is Debbie Cuthbert. And Debbie and I have known each other, I want to say since about 2008, Debbie.
Hmm.
Okay. I used to work for a group, a division of Alcoa, and then we were spun off and we were bought by a private company. And I don't know how to describe exactly what you were for that private company, but I think you were part of the fixer slash firefighter slash integration team, and to get acquisitions on board.
Hmm.
And they were doing a lot of acquisitions, and Debbie was in the middle of that. And she served us in that role and her employer too, as part of kind of a program and project consultant. Part of it, I think, was to make sure we didn't step on our own feet as we were moving along. But I've really enjoyed working with Debbie, and she came in and she was a very, very good representative for the company that had purchased us. So did I get that right about 2008?
That sounds about right. Yes.
Okay. Um, and your immigration story, after we talked about it, is a little more complicated than I thought it was, because I thought, oh, well, she's from New Zealand, right? But then we started talking about, right, wait a minute, you're not completely from New Zealand. So can you go ahead and talk a little bit about that and anything else that you want to do before we get into the questions?
Sure. So I am from New Zealand. I was born and raised there, and um, spent several years working for this private firm that you had mentioned. And then in late 2006, they did an acquisition of a business of International Paper based out of Memphis, Tennessee. And I was asked at the end of 2006 if I would be interested in coming up to the US for, it was to be a 2-year assignment. To oversee the extract of the business unit and stand it up as its own company. And so I came up in March 2007, and that was on an L1 visa. And that was, I applied for that. That was sponsored through the company I was with, and that was for a 3-year visa. And so I came up in March 2007 and worked on that assignment. And Memphis was a very interesting place, having come from little Auckland in New Zealand to this very foreign country and foreign city. And even though we're all speaking English, it was still quite comical getting used to understanding each other's accents and things like that. So yeah, so that was probably that was my first step into the US. Wonderful, wonderful. So, your journey sounds very interesting. Tell us a little bit more about what was the frustrating part and what was the easy part about this journey with respect to the visa, green card,
Okay.
in general immigration process, Debbie.
Oh, sure. Okay. So, well, let me fill you into where I am now. So, as I mentioned, I got the visa in early 2000, end of 2006, came up in 2007, and that was for a 3-year visa through the different business acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions that the company I was with that they did. I moved around a fair bit within the US, and in 2010, my L1 visa was renewed again because of that I was asked if I could stay on longer. And I was happy to. I was really enjoying the work I was doing and the people I was working with and then the place that I was at. And so my L1 visa was extended, but it was renewed for 18 months. And then at that point, I'm now at 2012, I applied for a green card. And again, it was all sponsored through my company. And I got the green card in 2012, and that was valid for 10 years. So that allowed me to, work in the US, I guess, unrestrained to a degree. And then in August 2021, so 9 years later, I applied for US citizenship. And so I went through jumped through all the hoops required for that and got my US citizenship in August 2021. And so I'm a real person now. I'm a legitimate US citizen and very happy for it. So my process of going through the first visa, the extension, the green card, and then the US citizenship
I think in comparison to maybe many other folks, my path was actually um, quite simple, not a lot of frustration. The visas and the green card, as I mentioned, were sponsored and actually applied for and managed completely by the company I was working for. So I was very fortunate in that regard. The US citizenship was something I did on my own. So I put myself through that, um, and I'm sure my company was appreciative of the fact that they didn't need to do anything else to, have me stay on. I took care of that myself, but not a lot of frustrations. I was very, very fortunate. The one thing that does stick in my mind that was quite interesting is certainly I did a lot of travel while I was working for my employer over the last, gosh, almost 20 years in the US, and coming back through immigration every time was always a bit of a nervous time. There were lots of questions about my job, and the owner of my company was also from New Zealand, and so he'd come up and bought businesses in the US. So there were a lot of questions that I had to answer around, why are you here? What are you doing? How long are you staying for? Why can't someone else do that? All of those sort of things. So that was always a bit of a nervous time, but not a lot of frustration in the process, as I mentioned, because a lot of it was taken care of for me.
Very cool. Very cool.
Mhm.
It was interesting. You said, I'm a real person now. Well, congratulations on the citizenship.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting about the border entry question.
Mhm.
I'm not sure we've had people talk about, re-entering and difficulties of re-entering, but I'm not sure we've had somebody talk about, hey, this is the type of questions that you get, and I'm on an L1 and they're like challenging
Yeah,
whether whether I should be on that L1 or not. Uh,
right.
yeah, so that was pretty interesting. So
I've only had one situation. I'm sorry to interrupt. I've had one
okay.
situation where they've taken me to the back room. That just amped up the anxiety a fair bit. But again, it was really just to quiz me on why have I got this pattern of going back and forth between New Zealand and the US, am I
Mm.
doing something illegal? So I mean, I get it, I understand it, but it is still very nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Did you used to go back and forth often between New Zealand and US?
I did. My family is still over there. I also have family in Australia, so I'd always go back to the Southern Hemisphere. Maybe every 18 months I'd go back just to catch up with family, and
Mhm.
yeah. So I guess they saw that pattern of travel and maybe wanted to quiz me a bit more about that specifically.
So
Yeah.
did they go through your things in the back room?
Well, if they did, they didn't tell me. And then
So
doing the citizenship, going through that process. I don't know. Do you want to chat on that for a little bit?
Sure.
Okay.
absolutely,
Really like
yes.
to share.
Yeah, what was that
That
like?
was quite interesting, and so the naturalization test, as they call it, you get given 100 questions, which I to this day I like to quiz my American friends on. But the you have 100 questions, and you get asked up to 10 questions, and you have to get six right. So it's not a heavy lift to get through. And it's things like, questions about the government, about rights and responsibilities, American history, geography, holidays, things like that. And then you have to take the oath of allegiance, and then you get your certificate of naturalization. So it was again, because it was such a formal process, there was a little bit of anxiety, making sure that you didn't say the wrong thing and all of that sort of stuff. But I mean, I'm a competitive person, so the fact that they're going to only ask me 10 questions, I'm like, ask me some more. I know the answer, ask me some more. So that was fun. The other thing that stood out for me on that very day, was there were a number of people going for their US citizenship that were wearing US military uniforms. And I found that really interesting that they were part of the US military, but not yet a citizen. I didn't know that you could actually do that. So it was a learning, but it was also very impressive that, folks are willing to take that sacrifice, even though, they're not citizens of the country yet. So kudos to them. I was very impressed.
Yeah, you can die for this country.
Right.
And not be a citizen.
And not be a citizen.
It's citizenship, yeah, completely waived, no problem.
Right.
So, I mean, at the risk of, so I won't put Dimple on the spot because she's not asking for it, but the risk of putting myself on the spot, you want to try a citizenship question?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm not a citizen yet,
So I can get away if I don't get the answer to that, but we're going to make sure that we embarrass Glenn. How about that, Debbie?
Let's absolutely try for
I
that.
know she's going to pick something really obscure.
Yes,
Well,
for
she's got the
sure.
list.
Yes, please try to find
list.
something that just totally, like, no one would know.
I'm going to see if I can find the questions.
Okay.
We can cut this bit out right while I
Yeah,
sit.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. No
yeah,
worries.
yeah,
Take
yeah.
it and we'll edit
They'll
this
be in
part
my
out.
office here somewhere, so I won't run away.
Okay. I like that. I like the pivot, Glenn. So thanks for recommending that.
People,
have them.
I mean, people always say that, so, like you'd never pass this test, right? So there we go. Okay.
Yes, I've heard
Okay.
this more than once. Debbie is not the only one who thinks that. So
Yeah.
when I take my citizenship exam next year, I'll quiz you some more, Glenn. So you better start preparing.
Okay, so let's start with something about the American government first. So, what is the supreme law of the land?
The supreme law of the land.
Hmm?
The supreme law of the land is Constitution.
Yes, well done. How many amendments does the Constitution have?
Oh, that one. I want to say 28.
27. Very close.
Close.
Well done.
Okay, I'm going to quit while I'm not too far behind. Unless you have one other you really want to ask.
All right, let me find a
Oh,
different.
we need a tiebreaker. You got one right, one wrong. So
Oh, yes. All right. Very
we
good.
need one
I
more.
was close on it though. Oh, I didn't say like 50.
Okay. That one's too easy.
That's not fair.
I want one that's a little bit challenging.
I love that.
Yes. That's too easy. All right, let's look at rights and responsibilities. What is one responsibility that is only for United States citizens?
Pay
Voting.
taxes. No, everybody.
Voting. I pay taxes.
Yeah.
I've been paying since
What is
forever.
one responsibility that
Vote.
only for United States citizens?
Mhm.
Only.
Voting rights, is that?
There are two to choose from, and you only have to answer one of them. So
Yes.
voting, yes, vote in a federal election.
I think you're right, voting, but I wouldn't see that as a responsibility. I would see that more as a privilege, but
Hmm.
I also think voting for the kind of government you want is a
yeah, I
responsibility.
think voting is a good answer.
Yeah, the other one was serve on a jury. So only citizens
Oh,
can serve on a
yes,
jury.
I knew that. I forgot. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But this is such a fun document.
Okay. Well, I didn't completely embarrass myself.
Good, because you got it wrong, Glenn. You're 1 out of 3. Awesome.
Okay, so continuing on,
Mhm.
for you, yeah, when you put on your immigrant hat, what's the most difficult part? And then also, what's the best part of living in the US?
So most difficult part, things like interacting with government agencies, I find to be quite intimidating. I find that, and I don't know if that's just because I'm an immigrant or if everybody feels the same way, but there's definitely an air of power when you're talking to, not from me, from the other side, when you're talking to somebody or engaging with a government department if you need something. That I always find a bit nerve-wracking. Because again, I feel like, am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to say the right thing? I don't know what they're asking me, because my point of reference is obviously New Zealand. That's what I came from and are familiar with, and things are just so much easier there. When I first came up to the US and I had to go through my first tax return, it was like 40 pages. And back home in New Zealand, it's 2 pages and you're done. So it's just things like that where everything at times feels a lot more involved and complex. And I know there are reasons for that. So that's probably one of the things that still to this day kind of gets me a little bit worried. But the best part about living in the US, well, when I was still in the US, my impression when I was still in New Zealand, my impression of the US was purely based on what I saw or read in the media, and I'm sure a lot of people have the same lens. And the media survives on drama, so we always heard the worst stories. So being asked to move up to the US was a little bit scary. I was excited, but also excited by the change, but also a little bit scared about are there guns everywhere and is there so much crime everywhere? So that's kind of the lens and the view that you get given from outside the US, is that it's a very dangerous place to live. And my friends and family who are in New Zealand and Australia, even still to this day, you know, their news is very filtered that they get over there, and they ask a lot of questions of, gosh, you know, are you guys in amongst that shooting? And we're like, no, that's seven states over, you know, just things like that. So but it was a great opportunity to come up here, and I absolutely jumped at it. And I've been here 18 years, so I feel pretty at ease now. And I feel it's very easy to live in the US, but you know, of course, that's my own experience. I know not everybody has the same view, and I know it's not easy for everyone. I do feel there's a lot of opportunity to do anything you want to pursue in the US. A lot of resources to learn, and a lot of them are free. And a lot of people to talk to about anything you want. Everything feels very convenient here. As well. And I feel like you know, moving from New Zealand to the US, I feel like the country mouse moving to the city, to the big city. But it's exciting. I've got a great group of friends, that great support network here as well. And I can't imagine moving back to New Zealand for any reason, really. This is now home for me, and I enjoy it here.
You know, okay, I'm going to attribute this to you, because in my mind, this has always been you saying this. But the one thing I remember, and I think it was you saying, you were surprised or shocked by the number of mattress stores.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I mean, what's the deal?
Yeah. Was that you?
It was me. Yes, I remember that, and that is still so strange.
Why are there so many mattress stores? No idea.
Wow, great memory, Glenn.
I've got a good memory for non-important things.
Oh gosh, yes.
Okay, well, moving on. You mentioned, Debbie, that you try to visit home, friends and family back in New Zealand once at least in 18 months. So what is it that you miss about home the most?
I do get asked a lot, based on my accent, where I'm from. I get asked that question a lot, and most people guess Australia because, you know, bigger country, more familiar. And I think maybe in the last 18 years, I've had maybe 6 people guess New Zealand. So, you know, they always get a prize. But people are often intrigued by why I left New Zealand. And again, I believe most people have the view that New Zealand is just this gorgeous, unspoilt, you know, lush green country. And in a way it is really. But it really was the job opportunity. That's what intrigued me most about moving up here. And so I do miss the naturalness of New Zealand, the clean, and the fact that it is unspoilt. And it feels very fresh. And like Glenn, that background you've got, you know, that that's New Zealand. It's just so fresh and green and dewy, and it feels very untouched, and it really is a faraway gem. But I don't think I would go back. As I mentioned, I grew up there, and you know, life growing up, we were, you know, very middle class growing up. We didn't have a lot, and my parents are both immigrants themselves, both from the Pacific Islands, from Fiji specifically. So I'm a first generation New Zealand, or a Kiwi, as we call ourselves. And so we grew up, you know, middle class, and life was, you know, running around outside until dark, and you know, just all the sort of things that every child thinks of. But New Zealand just has a special place in my heart. And my husband and I, I married an American fellow, and we will go back every now and then to New Zealand, more on vacation than anything else. And I'll show him around, and it just reminds me again about what a beautiful country it is. It certainly does have its own challenges. You know, the political climate is unstable, not unlike the US. But things like guns and that, you don't have guns in New Zealand. New Zealand doesn't have any poisonous spiders or snakes or anything like that. So you can go and lie out in the forest or out in the woods, and you'll be fine. My that reminded me of early on when I came to the US, and I just happened to be sitting down on the grass in a park, and the next day I had to go to the doctor because I had all of these bites all over the back of my legs, which I had no idea what they were. It was like a rash, and it was chiggers, which I'd never even ever heard of. So that was a bit of a rude awakening. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't, I mean, I miss the beauty of the country, but I don't necessarily miss living there.
So is there a food item that you miss?
A food item, a lot of it we can actually get up here. One of the one of the funny things my husband and I came across maybe about 6 months ago is New Zealand lamb at Sam's Club, which we were quite surprised about. So because New
Oh,
Zealand
wow.
lamb is very, very good. And
Mhm.
a lot of the very good parts of New Zealand lamb are exported. And so I was very excited to see that. So nothing like a lamb roast or lamb chops. So delicious.
Oh,
What
interesting.
about culture? How was it growing up? Anything culturally that you miss from your growing up memories, childhood memories?
One thing that I do remember fondly is a lot of sporting activity. We were always outside, and our family and our extended family, everybody was into sport. And so every weekend you were away just playing sport everywhere, and it was a very much an outdoor life living in New Zealand. I mean, Christmas you're in shorts and flip-flops because it's summer, and you're having a grill out, or we call it a barbecue, but it's a grill out as your Christmas meal. So things like that, with the complete reversal of the seasons and holidays and things like that. That's always fun when I tell folks here about our Christmas, what our Christmas used to be like. Everybody's kind of like, what? That seems so strange. But
Go
or
out to
we'd
the
spend
beach, kind
Christmas
of
at the
tan.
beach.
Yeah.
Wow.
We
So was
lived
it hard for you to get used to the white Christmas over here when you
it
came?
was quite different. It was quite different. And I'd spent a lot of time living in Chicago, so it was an
Ah,
eye-opener.
Yeah.
Gosh, really was an eye-opener.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
bet.
Yeah, for a lot of reasons.
Okay, so if Debbie, if someone were to ask you why they should travel to the US,
Mhm.
what would you tell them?
I definitely say that there's more to offer here, again, based on my experience, than anywhere else in the world that you can think of. So it really is the land of abundance and opportunity, almost excess, lots of areas of medical and education and sport and commerce. In my experience living here, you just have so many options and choices if you're willing to work hard for it. And and I made the choice to, leave my family and move to the US for what sounded like a great opportunity, and I was right. The work has been very hard. Glenn, you and I have worked together for many years, and we work hard, but we also get the spoils of working hard. And I've put myself through a lot of education since being in the US. I've funded it all myself, and because there is so much opportunity, and I was willing to put in the extra time and effort to do that. I've set myself up pretty well for that, and I'm proud of it. I don't know if I would have had as many opportunities if I'd stayed in New Zealand. I'm just not sure of that. Like the life I have here now, I don't think I would ever have had in New Zealand. It's just such a small country. The opportunities are not as many and not as big. Income's not as big, just things like that. So coming to the US has just really opened my world up in so many ways, and I'm so appreciative of it. Um, yeah, and there is so much to see in the US. There really is. I mean, New Zealand's a very small country, and you can drive from. I was in Auckland, and you can drive down to the bottom of the North Island, down to Wellington, like in 8 hours. And so you can probably drive the entire country from the very top to the very bottom. I'm going to say maybe within 20 hours ish.
mhm.
Whereas here, if you drive 20 hours, you're probably still in the same state
Yeah,
in some cases,
depending on the state you're in.
depending on the state. But I love that there's so much to see here. I love the history of the US. New Zealand's a very young country. And so there's a lot to see and experience and learn about. I find American history very fascinating. The American Revolution, for some reason, I find extremely fascinating. So I like to read about that. The weather here is very varied. New Zealand is very temperate. It's not as cold, and it's certainly not as hot. And I know in the US you have very different climates depending on where you are. And you can choose to be in the climate, you can live in the climate that you want to. I'm not a snow person, and I could easily live at a beach. So maybe that's our next move. But yeah, and because I grew up, as I mentioned, we lived 20 minutes from the beach, and every one of our school holidays, our parents would put us on a plane and send us to Fiji. So myself and my other siblings, as youngsters, we'd just get put on a plane with no adults, and they'd just fly us over, and our family would meet us at the other end, and we'd just run around like, little hooligans all over the place, and it was great. And that's kind of the life I was used to. And then, but when I first came to the US, as I mentioned, I landed in Memphis, Tennessee, and I loved it. I loved it. A lot of culture there, and a lot of good food and good music and good people. But it was like, whoa, it was so different from New Zealand. And then moving from I then moved to Richmond, Virginia, which is where Glenn and I first started working together. And I loved Richmond. It was not too dissimilar to New Zealand. It was the weather was a lot more mild, and just the environment, it feels very similar. And then I moved to Chicago for about 7 years, and very, very different again. Just the culture, the people, the lifestyle, the energy, the different things to do. It's all very different cities with very different vibes, and each one has its own character, which New Zealand, you don't get that so much. You might get it between the two islands, but yeah, otherwise it's pretty much the same all round. Which is not a bad thing if you like that.
So before you do the final question, I think we should give you the opportunity, if you want, to plug your book, Debbie.
Oh,
Right, because Debbie, you've written a few books.
I have, Jane. Thank you. I do have a couple of books, and it's a side hustle or a side hobby, which I really enjoy. I've got 4 books out at the moment. 5 books, 4 books. One of them is home curries, so it's family recipes from Fiji, and that is a book I've written after talking with a number of my family members in New Zealand and Australia and in Fiji and elsewhere, and asking them to send me their family recipes that have been handed down from generation to generation and obviously perfected over time. And I've written and collated all those into a book that's, as I mentioned, home curries, family recipes from Fiji. And my great dear friend Tanya in New Zealand, who's a chef, she tested all the recipes for me. My other great friend Megan over here is an editor, and she edited the book for me. And so that's out there published, and I love that book. It's very, very close to home. And there's a little bit of family history through there as well. So they're all for sale on Amazon. The other book is a 2-part series, and it's a book on iPhones for seniors, completely different topic. And I kind of triggered onto that idea after with either my mother-in-law or my mum and other, senior folks who were just really struggling with the basics of how to use your cell phone. So I thought, there's got to be something out there that can help. And there are a lot of books out there, but I felt like I could write one that maybe was a little bit simpler to read, less technology to it, larger print, all of those sorts of things. So iPhone for seniors, and I'm gonna have a copy here. iPhone made easy for seniors. Let's do the plug on that.
Oh, lovely.
So that's the fundamentals, and then we've got the intermediate one as well, and it's in large print. And this is the curry book as well. And so I've got those out there. They're selling pretty well. And then the first one I wrote was a book on a vacation my husband and our kids went on to Eleuthera in the Bahamas, which was such a magical place. So I've written a bit of a how-to guide and places to visit and things to avoid, and some of our experiences there. And that one's selling really well, but it's just such a fun thing to do. And again, it's just another example of what you can do if you search things out and you just put yourself into it. And yeah, very exciting. So thanks, Glenn, for letting me do that little plug.
You're welcome. And I want to get to the point where I have to think about how many books I've written.
Is there a 5th one coming, Debbie?
Yes.
Okay.
There is. One of the books I'm writing at the moment, and I'm hoping to get it out this year, is a book on project management, which is really my profession and has been my career for 2.5 decades now, maybe longer, I think. And I've created this project management methodology called OPM, the Occasional Project Manager. And it's really for anybody that gets assigned a project and they really don't know where to start or what to do. And I think that there's a natural intuition everybody has around, okay, I've just got to write down all the things that I've got to do. But there are other things that you can do that can strengthen the project or give it more chance of success without overwhelming in theory about project management. So I am a trained and certified professional project manager. That's my trade. And but I've developed this other more simplified program that I've developed a training course in it, and the book I'm writing is based on that methodology. So that's the next one to come out. I'm very excited about that one. Very passionate about it.
Very cool. Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
yes,
you.
good luck with that.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, one of the last questions that we have going back to our immigration stories, Debbie, is do you feel like immigrants from other regions of the world are treated differently? And if so, how? Can you share your experiences?
Yeah, I would say yes. I do feel that they are, and a lot of it I feel is down to media noise. The I find that the tolerance and acceptance of anybody that's slightly different is fading, and we can all speculate on what's created that, and we could go, a whole nother episode on that. But for me, I certainly don't begrudge anybody wanting to make a better life for themselves. I mean, that's exactly what I did, and for me, the US it feels synonymous with hope that I'm no different. I don't feel I'm any different from anybody else that's trying to make a better life for themselves, for their family, looking at areas of opportunity. And early on, I mentioned my path into the US, and I was very, very fortunate that I had a lot of support to bring me in. And then the final step, I chose to take myself. But I know that there are a lot of people and a lot of families that are not as fortunate, and they find other ways to come in. And the current political climate has a lot of views on that, which we certainly don't need to come through. There's a very interesting video that you both may have seen by a fellow by the name of Roy Beck, Beck. And it's about immigration, world poverty, and gumballs. So I would encourage you to look at it. It's very interesting, and it really illustrates a powerful story about how the best people are leaving their countries for better lives, like myself, but how that doesn't help their home country. There are mountains that need to be moved to help with that. And I came across that maybe 3 months ago, and it really is a very striking illustration around this whole movement to better countries for a better life and what you leave behind, and how it's not helping anybody but the country that you leave behind. Again, in my example, I didn't leave a country of poverty, being New Zealand, at all. So, for me, this doesn't really apply, but I know that there are certainly, PhDs that are leaving very poor countries because they want a better life and they've worked hard to get there and they absolutely deserve it. But how do we, not but how do we give back? How do we turn the tide on that so that people aren't running away from their home countries, but they can actually, come in and get what they need, but then turn around and give back? I just don't know what that looks like. But that video is very, very interesting, and it would be great if that could go further and into the next step of, right, now what? Now that we understand it more, now what? How do we do it? How do we help?
Yeah, I mean, I've always found it interesting that people that immigrate to this country usually wind up paying taxes,
Right.
right? So they're contributing, and
Right.
to what so what if you had that same tax base, and the PhD, or the surgeon we interviewed last year, Dimple, the amount of taxes that he must pay is probably significant, the number of people he must employ. But but then the question is, does the country he's coming from even have the ability to leverage that?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people from India who have migrated here. They're going back home. So I think personally, I can speak only from my experience. We often talk in our communities also. It also depends on when you made the decision, what was your country going through? What were you going through? What were your experiences? What were your aspirations? As opposed to what the country is now. Like I can only speak for India. It's such a blooming country and it's quickly becoming like the strongest country in the world. So we often talk about it like, oh, if we were to make the choice right now to leave our country, would we? And we all are of the same sentiment that, yep, we wouldn't have left India under this leadership, under this prime minister.
And that's a good point, right? Because
Right,
India is clearly a country that's on the rise,
right, right.
But then you have a lot of people whose countries are, kind of deteriorating around them.
Yeah, yeah. But I do know that the sentiment, like definitely the thought always crosses every immigrant's mind, like Debbie said, that yes, we've been paying taxes. I've been here, it will be 20 years in May. We've been paying taxes since the very first paycheck during the very first year. But we also take a moment and every chance we get to make sure that we also pay it forward or pay it back to the country that we are from. So this thought, whether or not we are able to do that or in a place in life where we can do it in varying degrees, this thought always comes in definitely first generation immigrants' minds for sure. So
Well, and I think
pointing that out, Debbie.
I think you bring up a good point because a large part of the immigration story is the money flow back home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are definitely, I came across a lady in a medical profession. I think, where was she from? It was a South America country, I think, from memory. And she is sending 90% of her paycheck back to her country, to her family, which is very admirable. And, I don't know if there's a way to institutionalize that for those of us who have come over here. Should we continue to owe taxes back to the country we departed? I don't know. I mean, I just don't know the answer, and it definitely requires a lot more thought and bigger brains than mine have, gone through this process. But yeah.
There's a lot of clever people that have figured out the best system to get the money back home. And it's like that system is well greased.
Right.
By the participants that know the best way to get the money back home. Okay. All right. So this has been lovely, but we do want to follow up with one last question, and that is there anything that we didn't ask that you wish we had asked you?
I don't think so. Nothing springs to mind. I've really enjoyed this discussion. This has been fun. And I've seen some of your other interviews as well, which are very interesting to watch.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, and I think
Absolutely.
I've enjoyed this as well.
Thank you. This has been fun. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you so much once again for being our guest, Debbie. And thank you for everything that you shared. I think to me, this is the beauty of what we do. We've been doing this for a year now. And this is the first time that we chatted about giving it back to the country, a guest talking about, how, right? I don't remember, Glenn, anyone else ever talking about that, or we never thought about talking about that. So we learned something new every day from our
great.
guests. So
maybe you can ask your future candidates of their thoughts on that topic.
I know. So we went through, it's funny you mentioned that we went through a rigorous process of tuning the questions down, keeping it to like 5 to 6. But it is so interesting to have these conversations. We always think of so many things while we're having this conversation. So I don't know if we want to make it to an hour, but we'll have to revisit our questions to Debbie's point.
Very good.
All right. Well, thanks again, Debbie, for your time and for all your candid share. And good luck with your 5th book and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you both.
And thank you everybody for watching Our Greatest Strength. And I encourage you to tell your friends. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you have anybody that you think would be a good guest, please feel free to reach out to Dimple or myself with that. So goodbye for now.
Yeah, special thanks to our viewers. Thanks. Bye.